And welcome to Let 'Em Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo, and we have another great show in store for you this week, live from the studios of Manhattan Neighborhood Network in Manhattan. And my guest is Cynthia Howell, who is the leader or the point person for Families United for Justice, which is an organization of families whose loved ones were taken from them much too early due to violence by the New York City Police Department. And this is in continuation of the shows we've been doing the last few days about the reasons why people have been protesting, the reasons why there was so much unrest in Ferguson, why there was so much protest in New York, and why the protest is continuing. It's because of real things, that happened, real people who were hurt, real families who were devastated, and in this case, Cynthia Howell's aunt was an innocent victim who was killed in one of the few cases, and we'll hear it from Cynthia, where the government and the city and the police actually came forward and said they were wrong. So that makes it a unique case, because that rarely, if ever, happens. So thank you, Cynthia, for joining us on Let Them Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Great, good to see you. And you have a T-shirt that has your aunt's picture on it, yes, in loving memory, right?
Yes.
And the day of her death was on May 16th, 2003. Could you tell us what happened on that day?
As she was preparing to go to work in the morning.
She was?
Yeah, she was on her way to go to work. A team of drug enforcement cops came in. They bashed in her door, threw a flash grenade into her apartment, and caused her to have a heart attack and die. And even then, they realized after that they had made a mistake, and a little too late. They had her alive. We had word that she was speaking when she came out of the building, and they had a T-shirt, not a T-shirt, a sheet draped all the way down. On the way to the hospital, she died.
Okay.
The drape was because the flash grenade caused her table to explode, and shards of glass were all in her legs and all over her, so they tried to conceal it from the neighbors. And unfortunately, it happened. It's little consolation that they did take responsibility for it, because it should have never happened. They did respectfully apologize in the news. Mayor Bloomberg attended the funeral. Even the police department apologized. But it's little consolation when you've done what you've done without any prior surveillance of the situation. They just went on a word of a drug addict informant, and the informant just said it's that apartment. But yet there was two apartments side by side. So which one he was referring to apparently was not Alberta's. Alberta, not only did she work for Mayor Bloomberg for 30 years, she lived in that building she lived in for 30 years. She was a pillar in her community. She Advent churchgoer. There was nothing that they could find wrong. The first thing that they tried to do is slander her name. And
how do they do that?
Well, they tried to find whatever they could find out bad about her, but they couldn't find anything, especially finding that she was employed by the mayor, a civil servant worker.
What do they try and look for? How do you know that? How do you know that had occurred?
Even at the funeral, Mayor Bloomberg, it was like he took a little jab of saying that, when they had office parties, that she would go to the dollar store and buy dollar store items. And we're like, what difference does it make where she got it from? It was like a little jab there, like to discredit her, what she would try to do as far as office parties and things go. But they tried to find out whether she in fact had drugs in her home, or if she ever had anything to do with people of that nature.
How do you know that?
Well, it came out somewhere along the line, and my aunts who were more privy to the court cases, and they divulged it to the family. But one thing they never told was that Alberta's sister was a cop, a retired cop. And the sister who passed before her was a retired correctional officer. All of them civil servant workers.
Right.
And they never divulged that in the media.
I find that interesting that in this case they would really stoop that low as to attempt to find some reason to, because let's say they did, that doesn't change the
what
fact.
they did.
Right, what they did, and doesn't change the fact that she was not the target of a no-knock warrant, and that there was no resistance at all. Now, there is some story that a confidential informant working for the police department was the one who pointed out
Her apartment.
her apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Was it ever clarified exactly why or whatever happened to that confidential informant?
I don't know. At one point, I've heard so many different stories that I just left it at whatever it is. It doesn't matter anymore because they made an awesome mistake because you didn't surveillance the area.
Right. That was there was no surveillance of the apartment of the room.
Apartment.
They could have called.
And when they came in the building,
Right.
the first thing that the neighbors that were going to work were going, where are they going? And when they found out it was Alberta's apartment, they all were going crazy because they said that couldn't possibly be, not Miss Alberta.
So they were trying to, even the neighbors in the building, when they saw the police.
When they went in, the first thing was, where are they going? And of course, you can't get on the elevators or anything or use them, so you wouldn't know. But when they found out it was Alberta's apartment, the first thing that they said was, oh no, not Miss Alberta. And it took people into a frenzy into that neighborhood. And, you know, we have some of the politicians that, you know, step out and do what they do, and some of them that don't. Some of them come with a lot of false promises of, we're going to, you know, not see this happen again, and hopefully not, and it's continuously happen.
Here's her picture, by the way, and this is a photograph that was taken beforehand, and obviously, and so this is the person we're talking about, a real living, live human being, not a caricature, not a newspaper story, but a person who was a victim of this kind of militarized policing, basically, I would call it. And I don't know really what more to say. What occurred after this? So the mayor came, spoke at the funeral. The police commissioner, Ray Kelly, at the time,
He wasn't allowed.
he wasn't allowed at the funeral.
Even though they did take responsibility, and our family, up until the Garner case, when we heard a semi-apology, and a Kai Gurley, a semi-apology, we were the only family, and I still state that we are the only family that has received a full-fledged apology.
Right.
In his speech, he says, she's in this casket because of us.
And
Bloomberg said it.
if you know, folks who've been watching this show would know that we've had numerous people from the various organizations whose loved ones have died at the hands of the police, and in every single case, it was a 12-year-old child playing, Nicholas Haywood Jr. playing, who was a gentleman walking down the stairs to see his girlfriend in an apartment. It was a woman getting ready for work for the police, for the city itself. It was case after it was a child, Brianna Ojeda, who was having an asthma attack. And mother was driving the wrong way down the street 1 block from the hospital, and the policeman refused to let her go to the emergency room, detained her while the child literally died in the backseat of the car. Case after case like this, where there was not even any hint of drugs or crime or guns. It's case after case after case, and you have to say at some point when, you know, okay, great, if it happened one time in 10 years or one time in 5 years, you can make it was a tragic error, but the tragic error has happened too many times.
Yeah, that's what makes Families United for Justice a little unique from the other groups that are out there. We do everything on a democratic process. We vote. We voted on our name. We vote on what we are going to do next going forward. We have meetings. We are the only families group that has linked the families together. We were only finding each other at the next funeral for whoever would attend, and when we would get there, it was more so we were holding each other like, here we go again. And now Families United for Justice is formed out of some of the exploitations of some of the other groups, some of the exploitations of these politicians, and, you know, we needed to put ourselves in our own circle and work with ourselves. And we're, even in that, we are our own support team. you know, it's really. It's really just really a great thing that we are able to talk with each other. Mm-hmm. I talked with Sean Bell's mother. Unfortunately, when Sean was killed, I suffer from asthma myself. I went to the funeral. When I say shoulder to shoulder people, I never seen a packed church like that. And I couldn't stay because I could not breathe. Mm. So I had to leave, and I took a flower from his casket outside, the flower from off the casket, not the casket, but the car, and I took it home with me, and I have his obituary. But unfortunately, I hadn't gotten a chance to meet Mrs. Bell until recently. Mm-hmm. I mean, out of all these years, I met Mr. Bell some years ago.
Does your group, Families United for Justice, attempt to come up with an analysis of why this is happening, or is it generally a support group for the people who are involved so that you have somebody to call?
Well, what we do is a support group for us all. And then we are centering ourselves to let each other know we can talk for ourselves. We don't need to stand at a podium with someone else speaking for us, for their group, or for that politician. We can speak for our loved one ourselves. No one can tell the story better than us. So we had to center ourselves, and we discuss where we're going next. We have some things that we're putting proposals, and we're going to vote on them. One of them is even going to Ferguson. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, if it's vetoed, fine. Right. But
have you been in touch with folks in I know in Cleveland there's a case. There's the Ferguson case. I mean, have you been in touch with some of these places around the country where these things have been happening?
Some of the other family members have, mm-hmm. and we're still galvanizing and getting ourselves together, and we're still growing. A lot of the families here, we have almost every high-profile case with us. Amadou, Bell,
right, 51
Graham,
shots, right?
Marley Graham.
From Marley Graham coming, busting down the door of the person's house. Mm-hmm. We've had these cases one after another, and many of the family members have been on this show over the years. Mm-hmm. What do you think is going to get us past this? I mean, first of all, I'm Paul DiRienzo. This is Let Them Talk. Cynthia Howell from Families United for Justice, whose own aunt, Alberta Spruill, was killed in a totally misrun and destructive militarized police raid on the wrong apartment. We have a number. We're live, and we have a number. We're going to flash it on the screen and take your calls. And I hope they're constructive calls, 212-757-1541, and join the conversation. And so I wanted to talk more about where things go from here. It seems to be we've gotten to a point where folks are saying enough is enough.
Oh, yeah.
And what's the plan? I mean, how are folks going to deal with this situation?
Well, some of us marched in Washington. Some of us marched at the Millions March here in New York. Mm-hmm. I've never seen that many people in one place in my life. Yeah. And being on the front line with all those families, it was really just such a feeling that, we have to do something, mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, these killings are still happening. And there's so many more that are happening that we don't even know how they come to be, and they don't get any media attention. Mm-hmm. So we have some families that are in our group that they just don't have any answers why their child is dead. And we want to be able to fundraise and get get some of those supporters that we need. We have a supporters listserv as well, and we want to get some of those people that can help us to get those answers for those families. We have families that are so grief-stricken that they're not ready to come out. They're not ready to march. They're not ready to do anything. You might see them once or twice, but they're so grief-stricken, they don't know how to handle this. They can't deal with it. And we want to be able to let those families know that we are with you, mm-hmm. And we have not forgotten.
Has the mayor's response to the Garner case and stop and frisk, has that been enough? I mean, do you feel that Mayor de Blasio, who's sold himself as an improvement over the previous mayor, someone who's more in touch with the community, has he really walked the mile? Has he walked the walk?
Not at all. And sometimes I wonder if he knows if he's coming or going, because he's caught between this side and that side. But let us not forget the root core as to why all of this is happening. It's not that everybody is standing on a corner. You're going in people's homes. You're going in, you're kicking their doors down. You're throwing in flash grenades. You're attacking people on the street for no apparent reason. You know, so when you see with Eric Garner, okay, the only thing the man said, this stops today, you know, and then when he said and begged, I can't breathe, you still didn't care. So,
is that the feeling in the community that this is, in a sense, it has a political side to it, ranging back to the Giuliani days of it's Giuliani time. You know, the rules of the game changed, and the police are going to be aggressing. And if there's in war, what do they call it when innocent people are killed? Or if there's collateral damage, you know, so be it that you know you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, you know, kind of attitude.
Well, I don't think, you know, everybody is in it to win it for their own political gain, unfortunately. So, and I see certain, I won't call their names, but I see them all the time at every other funeral, and they say the same line: we cannot let this continue to happen. And when it does happen,
like political politicians and things like that.
Where's the accountability? There's some people like the governor. He has the opportunity and he has the means that he can put in special prosecutors for cases of police brutality. And that hasn't happened. You know, and it's a sad thing to kind of see that every time we turn around, these cops are not being charged. So what is it? Is there a disclaimer on the application when you fill out the application to be a cop? Is the disclaimer saying that you will not be held accountable for anything that you do, or you will not be charged with a crime if you commit one? Because unfortunately, that's seemingly what it says. You know, none of these cops are getting the time that they should get, and they're getting off.
Right. And as you said earlier, I mean, you're not an anti-police person. You come from a family in which there's your aunt who was killed is working for the mayor's office. You have a police officer in the family. You have a corrections officer in the family. So
to this very day.
We're talking about a law-abiding, middle-class American New York City family that has done everything that was supposed to be done and was expected of you and more. And yet, you still get this kind of treatment. Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, they'll hand out a settlement. That doesn't settle the fact that if you don't change your policing policies, those settlements don't mean nothing. You're still going to go out and do some things. But we do have some of the politicians that went in Albany and did change or deregulate these use of grenades in
the
Harlem.
flashbang grenades.
Yes.
So they don't use them anymore. Was that a
well,
change?
I don't think so. I think they may, but from what I understand, there was some policy changes, and one of the politicians that I do deal with, he went to Albany and put it into Albany. So. With that being said, that to me is a good thing. Is a good thing, because you don't want this to happen.
But it was a bad thing that they were using them. I mean, the flashbang grenades in New York City. This isn't, you know, it's a very different location. That's for a long time. New York City didn't fire tear gas grenades and didn't do certain things because it was too compact of a city for these kind of things to be used. You know, whatever the policing needs, you had to do it a different way. And not to say that the good old days or anything, but there was a time when a police officer didn't call for 100 guys backup to show up with militarized gear. They were almost more like teachers or whatever. You know, they dealt with the problem as they saw it, and they usually dealt with it in a way that the person should come home. Even the person who might have been doing something crazy should go to jail or come home alive.
You know,
and not be shot down in the street in this militaristic way of dealing with things now.
The days, times have changed so much because you have these officers that are afraid to man and post their own area that they signed on. And not only that, you have some that are overzealous, and then they abuse their authority because they're behind a shield of the cover of a shield and a gun. You know, and unfortunately, we can't have those type of people supposedly protecting us. You know, back in the days, it was something different. You know, I seen a different policing. I seen it differently. And I have friends that I deal with in the precinct because I do the community affairs in my neighborhood. And the cops, and I let them know, we want those officers that are doing the actual wrongdoings held accountable. It's not against every cop out here. So no, it's not about, oh, we hate the police or anything of that nature. It's nothing like that. It's that we want those that are doing bad things. And if you're afraid, that's understandable, especially if you're a new cop, that's understandable, but maybe you signed on to the wrong job. So you need to be held accountable. I don't care. Your actions, walking and doing the things that you've done.
Yeah, and I've known friends of mine who were New York City cops and went on to even be DEA and FBI and things like that, and who came from the community, who came from the South Bronx, who came and they had when they went into it with a desire to save people's lives from drugs. It might have been it might have been unrealistic, and it might have been in itself problematic in its day, but it was from a real reason. And yet now we seem to be getting a certain percentage of bullies who are being allowed in because of their tough guy sort of
these
persona.
Cops the majority of the cops that are here policing the inner city communities aren't from the inner city, so they have no knowledge of what's going on in the inner city, because they're from Long Island and upstate New York or wherever they come from. So they have no knowledge of dealing with the community at hand. So when you don't have those type of police in your communities,
it's an old story. People have been saying that for a long time, and
of course
it hasn't changed, really. Even though the police department has allegedly or supposedly superficially gotten more diverse, you haven't seen really a positive change come out of that.
No.
What do you think? What's at the root of it? Why?
If I had the answer for that, I think we'd have a solution. But we don't have the answer for that, Like I said, no one is being held accountable because they're under a shield of a cloak of blue, and no one is, some of them, like I said, are afraid, and some of them are overzealous.
To be a fly on the wall in the places where they meet and discuss what their tactics and policies are going to be, it'd be very interesting to find out what's motivating them.
It would be.
But I think often I've heard it said, well, that's where the crime is, in the poor neighborhoods in Harlem and all these, and then we get. And then they said the crime is down. Yet we get calls like last week. I got a call from a person in Harlem who said, "I don't notice the crime down. The crime isn't down if you're poor."
Yeah.
Right. Well, the statistics are down.
Yeah.
Who controls the statistics?
Yeah.
Do you have a phone number or address or web page or email address that people can use to get in touch with you?
Yes, we do. It's Families United, the number 4 Justice. We also have a website, fu4j.org. So the people can get in touch with us. So
you can even just search Families United for number 4 Justice, and it'll pop right up. The information is right there for all of you. And do you have anything coming up, any events coming up in the next few weeks or months?
Well, we right now are, there's some memorials that we're doing, like Kamani Gray's memorials coming up soon. So we are in a position now that we have our own listserv. So we contact one another and what we're going to do or what we plan. And we have a lot of things that we are planning for the summer. But we have to put them on the table for a proposal and see what, everybody else agrees with.
Now, springtime's coming, and people are no less angry than were before all this cold weather. There would have been more protests. There was protests even in the coldest of winter, too. From the way we're discussing these events, there's almost for sure another tragedy waiting to happen around the next corner. Who knows when it'll happen? What is the response going to be? What's going to happen? What's going to be the response of Families for United for Justice in the springtime?
Let me say this that I've been saying a long time. All of our cases matter. All of us matter, whether they want to say that we matter or not. But I do know one thing, with all the uprisings across this country, and I've said this in a speech before, if they can't see what's going on now, let them take their Obamacare and get their eyes checked. And if they can't hear what's going on across this country, let them take their Obamacare and get their ears checked. And if they can't feel the movement and what's getting ready to go on in this country, everybody shake, rattle, and roll. They can't feel what's going on around them in this country, the devil with Obamacare. I think they need to go to their nearest pharmacy and get them an enema and get rid of the BS that plagues their behind.
We're speaking with Cynthia Howell from Families United for Justice. Her aunt, Alberta Spruill, was died from a heart attack shortly after a flashbang grenade was thrown into her apartment after the doors were broken down by police who mistakenly raided her apartment looking for a gun-toting drug dealer who only later actually turned himself in. I was reading the Times article is that as soon as he heard the police were looking for him, he went to the precinct and turned himself in, which I'm not joking around or being funny when I said they probably could have just called him at his apartment.
They should have went to the right door.
Right. They might have been able to call him at his apartment, told him to turn himself in, and he might have just done that because at that point it's sort of the cat's out of the bag, right? So that might be the easiest way to deal with it. And I don't mean that facetiously. I mean that happens every day.
Yeah.
The New York City Police Department is known for just calling people up and saying, you know, we're going to charge you. Why don't you come in?
Yeah.
And they come in with their lawyer.
Yeah.
And then get bailed out because they came in peacefully and left, and then
they surrendered.
They surrendered, right?
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. And that happens all the time. There's not. It's like people have this idea that somehow police work, it can be dangerous, but it's not entirely dangerous. It's very bureaucratic, and people even people who are the so-called bad guys are playing by the rules in their own weird way as well. You know, it's not always a big gunfight ready to happen. It's usually in the past, anyway. It seemed like the gunfights came when a gun was introduced in a surprise, not because they knew the guy had an apartment full of guns. That's what I don't get about this.
Yeah. Well, you know, unfortunately, you know, it is what it is as far as my aunt's case is concerned.
Yeah.
But we
tragic case.
Yeah. But we want to know what it's going to be for Akai, what it's going to be for Eric, what it's going to be for Ray Marley. We want to know what it's going to be, you know. Handing out settlements, we're not caring about what settlement this city has to offer or give. What we are caring about is accountability. We are caring about justice. And none of these families, not even my own, has received the justice. The cop who gave the okay to go in, he was transferred to Brooklyn. So we know how many cases have already come out of Brooklyn.
Any last thing, we're 20 seconds to go, anything you'd like to add, Cynthia Howell?
Well, you know, a fight ain't a fight unless you fight. And we have no choice but to fight. We have been thrust into this by circumstances.
Thank you very much, Cynthia Howell, for joining us on Let Them Talk.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Great. Good.